So for this one, we have the recipe has many ingredients, right? And we're going to try to be using a fields for to make this work, right? So at this point, first, let's check out our database and see what we have. I'm going to actually db drop because I am fully of the belief that I did this and cool. Rails db migrate. Model and show roots and associations have been set up for us. Great. So at this point, our goal is to create a form, right? So I can first do this. And I can say, hey, recipe r equals recipe dot new title peanut butter and sriracha sandwich. This was like a weird New York Times article that like came out and it was just like, hey, try out the peanut butter and sriracha sandwich. This became a like after I used this in another lecture in a previous cohort, became a recurring joke, and now I have one of the top reviews of New York Times' peanut butter and sriracha sandwich on the website. But they with pickles, right? They have pickles for some reason too. So at this point we can make this recipe, right? You can do r.ingredients.build. And we can say like, hey, the name here is going to be peanut butter. Quantity is going to be 7 peanut butter. And we can call it r.save. And it creates a recipe and an ingredient for us, right? So our database now, be like r.ingredients. Cool. We now know that all of our model is set like are set up, right? Like this all works. So I don't need to click around and like check the models and stuff because I just tested it and it worked. Cool. So we can just go straight to building this form. It says to use field for to generate associated fields. So let's take a look at our new, right? Render form. We don't have a form right now. You gotta do loop, loop, form.html.erb. This point, I can now run Rails S, put h1. The form will go here. Cool. Great. So this all works. And this is something I actually do when I'm developing myself. I test everything, like I make sure that that Rails S works. It's not just so that I don't embarrass myself in front of you all by like building out a whole stack and then getting errors. So at this point, we can start creating a form for, right? Because we're building out a recipe here. And even like the new, I don't know what this is doing, but I bet it's important. I bet it's probably not important actually. We'll see. But at this point, we do at form for recipe, do F, right? And what's this F stand for?
Form builder.
Cool. And Kyle, I saw you, I lip read you saying it too, so you get the credit also. Meg also gets credit. Cool. F.label, title. F.text field, title. We good here up to this point? This at this point should be something we're a little bit capable of doing, right? Now create a recipe by title, and this will work. We can take a look at our recipes controller, be like, hey, private def recipe params. And then we can do like params dot require recipe dot permit title. And I can call at recipe equals recipe dot create recipe params, right? And I can redirect to recipe. And I don't even need to like use an instance method here to recipe. Take a look. Let's call Kyle, what's a recipe from Animal Crossing?
Like a shovel.
Oh, they don't do food. I'm thinking of Breath of the Wild, another Switch game that I haven't played yet.
Yeah.
Squirrel stew. I bet that's a thing.
That is a thing.
Cool. And that works. Notice like nothing broke. This was entered into our database. But ideally, we also want to create a recipes. But first, yeah, squirrel stew I'm aware of from Alone in the Arctic, which we have been watching. Cool. So we actually just passed our first test. It like sets the title. That worked. Adds ingredients is our next test, right? So at this point, we're trying to create a list of potential ingredients, right? So I'm going to now search fields for. And there's a lot of things we can learn right off the bat. I forget which one I like better. I always mean to check out both of these, and then this one's loading faster. Cool. So we can start using fields for to start building out this form, right? But right now, it's not going to do much for us, right? First off, when we create a fields for, we're going to say like, hey, this is the fields for the ingredients key. We're eventually going to be sending over a hash for you, or I think it's a hash. And in this case, yeah, I remember I didn't like this one because it like gets a little bit more explicit than you need to get. But this is exactly what we're looking at here. Yes, the API doc one made me happy. So this is like, hey, fields for address do, and then this address fields thing, I'm actually kind of weirded out that they're calling it address fields because this is really just another form builder, right? Like this is just a form builder number 2. So I can be like, hey, do FB, whatever. Create a little end here. And now we're just creating another form inside of our form, right? And this one can be like f.label. It's name, right? Not title. You don't title a
FB.label.
Yes. BR. FB.text field name, right? And now we can do this for, there's quantity, right? Great. And we can make this a number field. Ah, shit. Sorry. That was absolutely not something I just wanted to send the database. I think I might have blown through a meeting. That's fine. We'll work that out later. But this still is only giving me 1, right? Now, in order to like, basically, when it's taking in ingredients, it's going to try to call ingredients on this recipe. But there's going to be a couple of other Like, so I like the way that I do this is I'm going to like be like, hey, I want to like do this, but I want to do it a few times, right? So I'm going to be like, hey, do cool. This will give me like this will allow me to like create like 5 different like recipe ingredients, right? In the most convoluted way possible. There's one, but this currently isn't going to change this right here because first I need to do one more thing. I have to like say, I have to like tell it, hey, there's actually going to be nested attributes here. So this will allow like the fields for to start doing its job, right? So how do we write this? Remember?
Accepts nested attributes for ingredients.
Let's double check to make sure that's correct. And I believe it is. Cool. Recipes controller gives a recipe .new. Let's do this better. And now if I look at the form, I'm first going to just make sure that like, I'm going to do this outside the partial first to like make sure it works because I'm not sure what this is doing. Then we can move it back in. But I'm trying to debug right here. Do a little refresh action. Still getting fewer than I need, right? This is definitely not the issue. It's making a fool out of me. Recipe accepts nested attributes for this. Let's double check that. For ingredient. Is that it? Nope, for ingredients. Cool, so that's doing something right here. What am I missing? I know I'm forgetting something, and that's what the issue is.
Everything f dot fields for.
Yes, thank you. Cool, cool. Classic. Cool, now I can redo this the fancy way. Awesome. So at this point, we're part of the way there, right? And I'm going to now be like, hey, permit. We need to change this permit to like take in this information, right? So I'm going to first do a bybug right here. I'm going to be like, hey, squirrel stew, name squirrel, quantity 1. No, we got to get a lot of protein in there. And then let's assorted nuts. Great. And we can start making the squirrel stew. So right now we have in these params, right? We have something called ingredient attributes. Cool. I'm going to like go a little bit further here, and I'm going to be like, hey, require recipe. And I'm going to call ingredients attributes on it. Permit. I'm going to permit name. And then we can't just permit ingredients attributes, can we? It's title. And do we say that this is an array? Let's take a look. Nope. We say, hey. Right, now at this point, we have to like describe exactly what's in this. So here, I'm going to have to then be like, hey, name. We're going to be like, hey, there's an array here. And we're going to be more specific, and we're going to say, hey, name and quantity. And we're going to stop doing that. What we're doing there is we're saying like, hey, ingredients attributes can take in these two keys, right? Each ingredients attributes can take in these two keys. And this is how we make things work, right? So now I can be like recipe.create. Let's take a look at what happens there. You'll notice that this created a bunch of ingredients for us, right? This actually worked. We didn't have to like add a custom setter method or anything. This accepts nested attributes for ingredients. When I pass in a hash of ingredients attributes that's formulated like this, right? Whoops. It knows, because I say accepts nested attributes, it knows to be like, oh, these are all different sets of ingredients, and then create them. It's kind of doing a lot of magic here, right? What's the most confusing part of this? Why did that work?
For me, the confusing part is if it's a hash in the params, but then when you permit it, you permit it as an array.
Yeah. So this array doesn't relate to the structure of it, right? This straight up just relates in this case, it just relates to, hey, we're passing an array of different keys that you should say are valid, right?
So you're using an array to call it basically a list.
Yeah, to be like,
this
hey, this
list,
is a list of good values that you can use.
which is why we're using an array.
Yeah, because that's usually how we pass in, like, hey, here's 2 or 3 different things. We go like, here's an array. But this array doesn't relate to the structure of the hash, only that it has these keys. So, and yeah, I'm confused by that too, which is why I first was like, this probably will take in a hash. And I'm like, nope, it takes in an array here. Because that's just, in this case, we're just being like, hey, this is the values that it is. That accepts. But now there's one more thing we have to do if we want to make it like reasonable. The easiest way to pass the test now is to, currently I believe that their tests require boop, boop, boop. This is going to get mad at me because I have a buy bug, of course, but also because it says, hey, but also because I forgot to copy in this permit and whatever. So I can be like, hey, permit ingredients. Let's try this one more time. We get the same failure, but in this case, it's because it's like, hey, I expected this array of 2 things. So I got these 5 things where 3 of them were empty strings, right? The easiest way to solve this problem, pass the test, delete these 3 chilies. But the better way to pass the test is to say, hey, reject if. I'm just going to pull up this fields for reject if. Accepts nested attributes and reject if. There we go. I'm just going to copy and paste this from here because I can read it. Right now I'm defining a proc. I'm going to say, hey, if this .name is equal to an empty string. It's just something that a accept nested attributes for can use. Let's take a look. Basically, what like reject if can take in a proc. It also, if we like click in on this link, reject if can take in a process, which is just a function that it can run, right? Passing in an attribute. It can also, you can also like define like a new, like you can also use active record things that already exist. You can also define a custom method that takes in an attribute and then does that. It's just something that when Meg asked me about, I Googled, and it's useful, except I broke it.
How you would do it
reject.
if you want to check if it was blank, but then also check for duplicates, like setting up that reject post and then have like do your custom method for it.
That'd be exactly how I would do it. Cool. Make sure to add the colon. And this works. So all we really needed to do, right, was use this accepts nested attributes for method, and then set up our ingredients attributes, right? And then in the form, which I'm going to move to its correct location, use a fields for, passing in back in our new. Does everyone see what this is doing right here? We're saying, hey, we're building 5 things that then we should have fields for, right? If I do this, it's going to by default just give me 1. Or none at all. Once I give it enough, like once I say like, hey, there's going to be an ingredient here. Hey, there's actually going to be 5 ingredients here. It suddenly just passes this into the form and passes these in as ingredients and starts iterating through them and creating a form for us. Do you all see how that works? It's just active record magic that we use the documentation to figure out. It might be useful for you.
So it's kind of like how, or it's the same as when we do form for at recipe, you have to do a recipe equals recipe.new.
Yeah.
In order for it to make those fields for us. So
exactly.
Fields for, but specifically for the ingredients, which is why we have to build them.
Yeah, we're doing like, hey, here's a form for all of our ingredients. And in this one, Meg, I think that the edit, you don't even need this. You can just call at recipe, and it's going to go through all of the recipes that it currently has. You will need it if you want them to be able to add additional recipes apart from your own. But okay. Cool. We good? Thanks for sticking with it.
Thanks for going over these, Nikki.